Health Watch is presented by UMass Memorial Health Care. Here, caring for you.
Welcome to Health Watch, presented by UMass Memorial Health Care. I'm Brittany Schaefer, and I'm joined by Barbara Olensky, and we're here today to talk about the microbiome and weight loss. So my first question for you is, what is a microbiome?
The microbiome is, this is a wonderful thing that we're doing in research, but it's also become integrated into clinical care now. And we find that it's one of the missing pieces that helps to explain metabolism, disease, allergies, immune system. It's correlated with just about everything you can think of. It's the good bacteria and the bad bacteria that live on us, within us, help us make vitamins, help us with energy extraction, and you could read calories into that, how somebody is able to eat just about everything and never gain any weight, and how others seem to eat very little and gain weight easily. So it helps us to answer many of these questions, as well as looking into chronic diseases and how it's correlated there.
How does understanding one's microbiome play into the ability or inability to lose weight?
When someone has more adverse bacteria than beneficial bacteria, the adverse bacteria tend to produce substances that are irritating, and these can break through and go into systemic circulation. This has an interaction with metabolism. They also live off particular foods in our gut, and the beneficial bacteria live off some other foods in our gut. And so people are becoming a little bit more in tune with probiotic foods, and those have become popular in the commercial arena. There are also some caveats, and we'll be going into that when I talk in a couple of weeks about what to watch out for.
Which foods are good for my microbiome?
So what we do is we say, okay, let's assume that you have been doing everything that you can to reduce weight, and you have hit a plateau. It just feels like, is there anything else you can do? The first thing we do is we look to see, are you nutrient deficient? Nutrient deficient not only in terms of your immune system, your human body, but also nutrient deficient in terms of how you are feeding your beneficial bacteria. So we might say, I want you to start eating fermented foods being foods such as plain yogurt, plain kefir, and there's a reason behind the plain. Other foods like sauerkraut or fermented vegetables or beets might figure in there. Dark leafy greens are also incredibly important. And then we look at prebiotics, which is the food that keeps the beneficial bacteria alive. The beneficial bacteria then produce substances that benefit us in terms of our metabolism, our ability to make certain substances that can help us with well-being, including weight management.
Which foods feed the adverse bacteria?
This is interesting because it correlates with what we know to be some of the foods that are correlated with weight gain. Sugars, they love sugars. In fact, we see an imbalance of the microbiome to be continually present in patients who have diabetes and other such diseases. But the sugars will feed the bacteria, and so when I talk about sugars, it's not only sucrose, it's also wheat and white flour products, these kinds of foods. And so in abundance, they're going to shift the balance as like a teeter-totter might, and so we have more adverse bacteria that are building up in the gut and elsewhere. Some folks have skin disorders, eye disorders that can be balanced by a beneficial bacteria.
What other things besides food can disrupt my microbiome?
We do find in some of the studies, and American Gut is one of the ones that's online that your viewers might want to go to learn a little bit more about this. We do find in research studies that there are certain correlations in patients who have a more beneficial bacteria, and that is exercising outside, except when it comes to following a bus or pollution or these kinds of things are not good for our beneficial bacteria. But fresh air, sunshine, diversity of exposure is one of the things that's key to a beneficial bacteria, because it's not just about one acidophilus or lactobacillus. It's about cousins and families that work together and enhance ability, each of their individual abilities, to work on our systemic well-being. So it comes down to more than one, and we need a diversity of exposures.
I have trouble digesting foods higher in fiber. What can I do?
Many people are not used to eating foods high in fiber and might find when they start to introduce these foods that they have bloating and dyspepsia. Sometimes right after they eat the food, sometimes it's within 2 to 3 hours. This is because of a lack of digestive enzymes that their body has become lazy and isn't producing, and there's also some genetic factors. I find Asians, Latinos are a little better at producing those enzymes, but you can buy them over the counter to help you with what you're about to eat. So when it comes to legumes like beans that are high in fiber, I might want to take a couple of digestive enzymes so I can make it through the day without being uncomfortable. The other thing to keep in mind is we need to increase water intake. Non-caloric fluids are very important for getting it down past the stomach and into the intestines, which is where it's going to do its magic. And so fiber is, especially soluble fiber, which can swell and bind, is very important towards binding with fats, helping with energy extraction, very important for cardiovascular disease, diabetes, just about anything I can think of, because it's a food for the beneficial bacteria as well.
How can some foods be fat-burning foods for some bodies, but not for others?
This is where the imbalance really comes into play. And it can take, depending on where we're starting from, up to 3 months to get rid of the cravings for sugars. Because when you stop eating sugar, and you're used to eating sugar on a daily basis, of any form, it might be juices, it might be granola bars, it might be sweets of any kind, it might be a lot of bread. When you remove it, there are cravings caused by the adverse bacteria sending signals to the brain, just the same as when you're hungry, you get signals you're hungry. And it can take up to 3 months to really get to a point of saying, I don't need to have that after dinner tonight. I'm making up my mind because it goes into the intellect, instead of bypassing the intellect into the biological part of our beings.
How does a person's microbiome relate to a person's metabolism?
You cannot live without your microbiome. And we used to think for years and years that it was always a bad thing, because when we were aware of it, it's when we had infection, strep throat, other types of bacteria. And so we would kill them all off with antibiotics. We would kill off all the bad guys. Unfortunately, we also kill off the good guys at the same time. And the same as when I rototill my garden, I can rototill all the weeds out of the garden, everything, and redo all of the soil. And then I sit back in my lawn chair. I'm really not going to see tomatoes grow unless I plant them. So a lot of what we're doing is replanting the microbiome with a richness of food variety and nutrients, as well as exercise and some other components of good living. Stress is also a biological factor to the microbiome. There's a big brain-gut reaction. And we have just begun to understand the microbiome, but it is absolutely, completely correlated with metabolism.
How does a person discover what their imbalance is?
There are tests in research, but they're not very informative in terms of, well, what am I going to eat to correct that? And everyone has their own form of imbalance. And so people generally, they can tell. This is where the patient has been telling, Doc, I've been doing everything. What can I do now? And I have to admit that it's still within the research realm, although it is expanding and people do have access to it, some of this information that we can use to help patients to redo their diets, to redo their lifestyles. It's not an easy thing, but we're learning more every day. We have a website now that is oriented towards patients with inflammatory bowel disease, and there are a number of recipes that are directed at changing the microbiome. Also very helpful for weight loss.